Imagine waking up one morning in your own bed, in your own home, only to realize that something subtle but deeply unsettling is not quite right. The pictures on your wall are slightly different. The street outside your window looks familiar, but not exactly the same. People you know seem to recognize you but act just a little off. And soon you begin to realize a terrifying truth. This world is not yours. You've somehow slipped into a parallel universe, one where everything is nearly the same, but not quite. And the worst part, you have no idea how to get back. This is the story of a man who woke up in a parallel universe and couldn't return. But this is also a reflection, a mirror held up to our own lives, our own assumptions about reality, identity, and the thin line between what is known and what is possible. Because maybe, just maybe, we are all only one strange twist of reality away from a world we can't explain. Let's begin. He opened his eyes and blinked. The ceiling fan spun lazily above him, casting a rhythmic shadow over the white plaster. It was his room, or at least, it looked like his room. Same bed, same desk, same faint crack in the corner of the ceiling. But something in his stomach twisted, that quiet signal we all sometimes get when something doesn't quite add up. He sat up slowly. His phone was on the nightstand. He grabbed it. The time was right, the date too, but when he opened his gallery, the most recent photos were not ones he remembered taking. A birthday party he didn't attend, a dinner with friends who didn't live in his city. At first he thought it must have been a dream or some glitch in his memory, maybe stress. But then he walked outside. The neighborhood was eerily familiar. The trees, the pavement, even the sounds, but the names on the mailboxes were wrong. The shop at the corner had a different name. The old bakery, where he'd been getting coffee for years, was now a clothing boutique. He entered it, confused, and the woman behind the counter greeted him with a smile that hinted at familiarity. "You're early today, Tom," she said. Tom. That wasn't his name. He tried to laugh it off. "Sorry, I think you've got me confused with someone else." The woman frowned, then looked again. "Wait. Aren't you Tom Bishop from Pine Street?" He shook his head. "No, I'm sorry, I don't live on Pine Street. I live right here on—" He turned around, pointing toward his building, but the nameplate outside the entrance had changed. It now read, Miller Residence. Panic started to rise. He checked his wallet. His ID was still there, but the address on it didn't match any street he knew, and his name was indeed Tom Bishop. He stumbled backward, his breath shallow. This had to be a dream, or a prank. But as the hours passed, the evidence only grew. He knew things, events, memories, people, but they didn't match what others around him believed. The news spoke of things that never happened in his world. Famous names were unknown, and unfamiliar politicians were in charge. He began to understand that this wasn't just some elaborate confusion. He had slipped into another version of reality, one that was close, so close to his own, but undeniably different. The days turned into weeks. He searched the internet, forums, strange corners of Reddit, and obscure conspiracy websites. He found theories, quantum entanglement, Mandela effect, multiverse leaks, but nothing that could explain why it had happened to him. He tried to find someone, anyone who might understand, but every time he got close, people looked at him with sympathy or suspicion. Some thought he was crazy, some thought he was joking. One night, he found a podcast hosted by a man who claimed to have experienced something similar. The man described waking up in a world where his wife didn't recognize him, where his dog was gone, where history had changed. "You start doubting yourself," the man said, "but eventually you realize the only thing you can do is adapt." He listened to the episode 3 times. That word stuck with him. Adapt. But how do you adapt to a life that isn't yours? How do you continue when every day is a reminder that your world is out of reach? He started taking notes, mapping the differences, writing down everything he could remember about his original world, family names, historical events, inventions, books, songs, and comparing them to this one. Some differences were tiny, others were monumental. One night, as he sat staring at a candle on his kitchen table, a table that wasn't supposed to be there, he asked himself a question that would change the way he saw everything. What if I wasn't it meant to go back? What if this wasn't an accident, but a shift that was supposed to happen? And then a second deeper thought, what if everyone at some point in their life wakes up in a reality that doesn't quite match the one they came from, but they were just too afraid to admit it? That idea haunted him. He began to talk less and observe more. The people around him were warm, kind even. His job, a job he didn't hire to apply for, turned out to be something he was good at. He slowly began to inhabit this version of Tom Bishop, even if he never stopped feeling like someone else inside. But there were moments, strange moments. A child waving at him and saying, "You're not supposed to be here." A radio host joking about glitches in reality. A dream where he saw himself, the real him, trapped behind a glass wall, watching this world from the outside. He wasn't sure what was real anymore, or if that even mattered. Because now this was his life and the door to the old one was gone. The mornings felt heavier now. Not physically, and his body seemed fine, even healthy, but mentally, emotionally. He had become a visitor in his own skin. He looked in the mirror and saw a face that matched his memories, but the man staring back had a different life. He couldn't tell anyone the full truth anymore, not because he didn't want to, but because the words felt too absurd. "I'm from another universe" is not something people accept over coffee. It was easier to smile and pretend, to play the role of Tom Bishop. The more he played it, the more real it became. But deep down, a part of him always whispered, "This isn't home." He often walked alone at night, wandering through unfamiliar streets that still felt vaguely known, like echoes of dreams. One evening, he passed a bookstore and saw a familiar name on the cover of a novel in the window, his favorite author. Except in this world, the book had never been written. The plot was different. The themes were off. He went inside and bought it anyway. Reading it was like watching someone else retell a memory that wasn't theirs. Close, but hollow. He started documenting everything: journals, recordings, drawings, even soundscapes. The subtle differences fascinated him. Constellations that had one star too many. The moon's shape slightly irregular. The way people greeted each other. How music felt less emotional. How laughter echoed a little shorter. He wasn't just trying to get back anymore. He was trying to understand. If this world was real, and it clearly was, then so was his experience. The turning point came one day in the form of an envelope. No return address, no stamp. Just his name on the front, written in handwriting that looked eerily like his own. Inside, a note. "You're not the only one." That was it. He looked around, searching for someone watching, but the street was empty. The note burned in his hand. His heartbeat accelerated. After months of isolation, denial, and secret research, this was the first sign that someone else might know. He spent the next days retracing his steps, checking mailboxes, surveillance cameras, anything, nothing. But he couldn't stop thinking about that phrase. "You're not the only one." Eventually, he discovered a small gathering in a park. People sitting in a circle, talking softly. It looked like a meditation group, but something felt different. He watched from a distance at first, until one woman broke off and walked toward him. Her eyes locked with his, not aggressively, but with recognition. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked. He nodded before his brain could stop him. They sat down. They didn't ask each other where they were from. They didn't need to. They spoke in metaphors, in clues, like spies of reality. She talked about waking up and remembering the color of the sky being wrong, about songs that didn't exist, about a man she once loved who now didn't remember her at all. He listened and told her about his street, his bakery, the name on his ID. They weren't crazy, they were displaced. They met weekly after that, a small group of 5, all with similar stories, each one slightly different, but sharing that same hollow ache, like trying to find your heartbeat in someone else's body. They called it the fade, that feeling of slowly losing the texture of your original world, while this one grew more real. The fade wasn't immediate. It crept in like fog. And then came the incident. One of the members, a quiet man named Eric, stopped showing up. After 2 weeks, they went looking for him. His apartment was empty, no trace of him ever existing. But more than that, when they asked neighbors or co-workers, no one even remembered his name. It was as if Eric had never been part of this world at all. That night, the group sat in silence, terrified. What if Eric had faded completely? What if remembering the old world too strongly made you disappear? Or worse, what if you returned to the original world, but no longer belonged there either? The man began sleeping less. He had vivid dreams now, dreams of corridors with infinite doors, of clocks running backwards, of cities floating upside down. In one dream, a woman with no eyes told him, "You are in between. Choose a side or vanish." He woke up screaming, but the idea stuck with him, choose a side. What if he was straddling realities, never fully grounded in either? And what if the only way to survive was to choose one and let the other go? But how do you let go of the world where you were born, where your parents lived, your childhood happened, your first love laughed? He didn't want to forget. He wanted to honor that world, to preserve it, even if only in his mind, so he built a ritual. Every night, he would sit by his window and tell stories aloud about his old life. He would describe the smell of rain in his real city, the sound of his brother's laugh, the taste of his favorite soup. He believed that by remembering, he could keep it alive. That somewhere the version of himself who belonged there would feel it, and maybe, just maybe, find his way back. Time was a strange thing in this world. It moved the same way, but felt different. Some days rushed by like water down a drain, others dragged, heavy and thick. He had lost count of how long it had been since he had arrived. At first he tried to keep track, counting days, drawing marks, recording moon phases, but eventually even that felt meaningless. What mattered now was something deeper, staying grounded, holding on to a sense of truth, however fragile. And yet something inside him was shifting. He no longer recoiled when someone called him Tom. He began recognizing street names, learning the rhythms of this reality. The coffee from the new cafe, the one that had replaced his bakery, started to taste like home. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't forgetting. It was survival. Because maybe the most human instinct isn't returning, it's adapting. But even as he found ways to live, the question never stopped. Why did this happen? Was it random? A crack in the fabric of the universe? A punishment? A glitch? Or had he been chosen, plucked from one timeline and dropped into another like a pawn in a cosmic game? The theories tormented him. He began writing a book, not to publish, not to share, just to make sense of it all. He called it Displacement. It wasn't a memoir, not really. It was a map of perception, a journal of shadows. He filled it with details of both worlds, side by side, compared, analyzed. He even wrote letters to himself, to the version of him that still might exist somewhere else, hoping that across realities, consciousness could somehow whisper between the lines. And then one night something happened that shook everything. He dreamed of a room, white walls, no windows, just a door. In the dream he stood in the center of the room, holding the book he'd been writing. Across from him stood another man, identical, mirror-like, holding the same book. They stared at each other. Neither spoke. Then the other man reached out and said, "You're living my life." He jolted awake. The room was dark. The streetlights outside cast soft amber stripes across the floor. For the first time in months he was afraid. Not confused, not sad, afraid. What if this was more than accident? What if his presence here meant someone else had been displaced as well? Had he stolen a life? Had his other self, the real Tom Bishop of this world, been pushed out, lost in the same cosmic shuffle? And then another, more terrifying thought came. What if he wasn't the first? What if this happens all the time and no one notices, because the people who vanish are replaced so seamlessly? He couldn't sleep. The next day, he wandered aimlessly through the city. He looked at people with new eyes, wondering if any of them were like him, echoes from somewhere else. What if that man on the bench was from a version of London that never survived the war? What if that woman buying oranges remembered songs that never existed here? And maybe that is why some people feel out of place their entire lives, not because of trauma or mental illness or personality, but because they simply don't belong in the version of reality they woke up in. That idea changed him. He began leaving notes around the city, tiny pieces of paper, folded and slipped into library books, taped beneath park benches, stuck inside menus at restaurants. Each one said something simple. Do you feel like this world isn't yours? And beneath that, a location, a time, and a message, you're not alone. He waited. Days passed. Weeks. Nothing. And then, one night, someone appeared. A young woman, early 20s, eyes full of questions. She sat beside him on the bench at the edge of the river. She didn't say much at first, just looked at the water. Then, finally, she whispered, "It happened to me when I was 15. I never told anyone." They talked for hours, not just about details, those were different, of course, but about the feeling, the shift, the moment everything became slightly wrong. Her version of Earth had different continents, different religions, but the same pain, the same ache for something lost and unreachable. Soon more came, not many, but enough. A man from a world where birds never existed. A girl who remembered 2 moons. A woman who swore time had reversed for her twice. They weren't a cult. They weren't fanatics. They were wanderers, strays of the multiverse. And together they built something like a sanctuary, a place where truth didn't have to be proven, only shared. In time he stopped trying to go back, not because he gave up, but because he realized he had become this version of himself, not a replacement, not a copy, but a hybrid, a bridge. And maybe that's what humanity is, after all, a constant becoming. A dance between realities, identities, choices. Sometimes, when he walks past mirrors, he still wonders if the man inside will move differently. If, on the other side, another version of him is doing the same, watching, waiting, wondering. But now he smiles, because he knows something most people never will. That reality isn't fixed, that the universe is wide, and that even if you wake up one day in a world that isn't yours, you can still make it home. This story isn't just science fiction, it's a metaphor, a mirror. Because sometimes we all wake up in a version of our lives that feels strange, unfamiliar, or even wrong. We all have moments when we question our path, our choices, or the people we've become. But maybe the goal isn't to get back to something we've lost. Maybe it has to learn how to live in the new world we are given, with courage, with grace, and with the willingness to connect with others who feel just as lost. Because in the end, the deepest truth isn't about which universe you're in, it's about who you choose to be while you're there.